Hello and good evening. Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider, then reconsider the news of the day. I'm Melisa, Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
And joining us in the studio is our favorite Ibrahim Sani, host of Notepad with Ibrahim Sani.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're going to do a bit of a news roundup this week because it's been a really heavy news week. We saw the end of this session of Parliament. Also, lots of things happening in politics and around the world. So I think, kick it off with IPCMC, which is the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission Bill, better known as IPCMC Bill. Now, the government decided this week to defer the second and third reading of the IPCMC Bill to the next Dewan Rakyat meeting. What this would have done was it would have created an independent oversight body to investigate and handle all disciplinary action on police misconduct. It was seen to be such a disappointing move on the part of the government to delay this. What did you think, Sharaad?
Yeah, well, you know, we in fact had on the show Melisa from Lawyers for Liberty. Melissa, if you remember, I mean, much of the conversation had to do with a long history, the very long history of the development of this idea, going back to the time of Abdullah Ahmad Badawi, the Prime Minister then, who instituted a Royal Commission of inquiry into the police force, looking at all kinds of dimensions of the police force, including a question of an oversight mechanism. There was resistance then to suggestions made by the Royal Commission, and today we see the same kind of pushback coming from the police force. Essentially, I think the message that Melisa gave us was, in no country have the police force...
Sasidara, not Idris, yes.
Yes, not this Melisa, but the other Melisa, agreeing, saying that, you know, no country did the police actually say they wanted it, but there was political will to push it through, and those countries are much better for it.
Until there isn't, right? Because I spoke to a lot of our colleagues who actually went to the Parliament. When they were covering the Parliament throughout the week of last week as well as this week, they say that they have quoted some MPs saying that the police constituents are now telling their MPs that they don't want this and they will retaliate. So imagine we have 222 MPs. Each and every single one of them have a sizable amount of police community and voters inside it. So what we're looking at is actually even Pakatan MPs, not just the opposition, but Pakatan MPs facing resistance to get this bill through.
So this comes back to what Sharaad said. Is there political will to kind of galvanize this, or is Pakatan Harapan afraid of making these tough decisions? Now, you know, when we spoke to Melisa Sasidar and Sharaad, Director of Lawyers for Liberty, earlier this week, one of the key things I thought was particularly interesting was all this, I guess, all the conversations around the IPCMC bill and the deferment of it had put the law minister front and center, right, Dato' Liew View Keong. But actually what Melisa pointed out was, in fact, we should be asking these questions of the Home Ministry. Actually, here's a clip from Melisa.
Secondly, although the law minister has taken it upon himself to table the bill, but essentially this is a Home Ministry bill because the police force is actually under the Home Ministry. So the only person who can withdraw the bill is actually the Home Minister. And I think there's so much spotlight on the law minister because he's the public face of this, but not enough is being shown on the Home Minister,
Muhyiddin
Yassin, who has to answer why did he, despite the cabinet green light to table this, why did he pull back this bill?
Okay, so does this bill require bipartisan support, as we had like with the Undi 18 situation?
It requires a simple majority. Okay. So it's just a matter of commitment from the Pakatan Harapan government, and they have the numbers. But unfortunately, as I said, you know, it's the Home Ministry that is, you know, the stumbling block to this. And I think they need to answer why did they pull the plug on this at the 11th hour.
And that was Melisa Sasidaran, the Director of Lawyers for Liberty. And, you know, I think it's really fair that we should be actually posing these questions to the Home Ministry. We should not let the Home Ministry get off the hook in answering why they decided to defer the IPCMC bill. Also, what is the backstory? Why all of a sudden, you know, it was scheduled to be tabled and debated, then what happened, right?
There is a discord amongst the Pakatan MPs, as simple as that. When you have over 120 MPs on your side and nearly half of them, or whatever the number of them, disagree with you, how is it possible for you to table a bill when you have, you know, discord among your own ranks?
Well, you know, so that's one issue, but this is a decision for the Cabinet. The Cabinet took a very strong line. you could see this happening, right? Dr. Mahathir, not known to be a man overly democratic, you know, he is the Prime Minister. If he signaled he wanted this, he could have made a deal of some sort. The other thing that it must be noted, this is a bill that is going to make the police force, as they say they want, to be a professional one, benchmarked against global standards, right? So what is the opposition? There are a lot of propaganda against the IPCMC. It's not constitutional. You know, it will not give natural justice to the police force. All of which have been answered over and over again.
Debunked, right? Debunked, yes.
Absolutely debunked. The question is, if a group of, say, let's put them like developers who are corrupt and used to certain types of freedoms are now going to be regulated by a law, and they say, I'm going to go to every MP, you know, we are going to go to every MP that's in the parliament and lobby to prevent us from continuing our corrupt practices, would the political elite say, oh yes, of course, you can continue in your ways?
It's not a rhetorical question. It is. They said that. They're like,
Well,
yeah, oh, done. We heard
so
our voice.
precisely.
We heard our
what
constituency.
has
We're not
changed?
pushing this through.
Right? So
Nothing
the
has
question-
changed.
and that is the
They
fear.
can't be the majority.
Yeah.
So in terms of numbers, this is not the issue. So why are our political leaders afraid of the police force?
That's the right question. It's not about whether or not this is...
And that's the question we want you to consider tonight while we mull over other big news of the week. Sunday, 1st of December, we celebrated World AIDS Day 2019. Again, you know, looking at the numbers that were released this year, it turns out that 94% of HIV cases were transmitted through sexual relations last year. Millennials making the bulk of HIV cases. Most of the new HIV cases in Malaysia involve the age group between 20 to 29. I think these are really fascinating figures we need to peel back.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that the headlines do is they give you the new profile of people being infected, new infection rates, where they're coming from. All that is great, but actually the story isn't that. The story is really, why have there been improvements in certain sectors, right?
Yes.
Mother-child transmission largely disappeared. We now a case to be celebrated globally.
Yes.
The other thing, of course, is the reduction in terms of intravenous drug users. Now that another celebrated case where you see public policy, pragmatic, non-judgmental, you know, around the principle of harm reduction, doing so well. Question is, can it be applied, the same pragmatism be applied in other instances? So
To
you just look
sexually transmitted HIV cases.
absolutely. And in fact, we have had comments coming out of the ministry and so on and so forth. The MAC, the Malaysian AIDS Council, was we just don't have enough awareness of sexual reproductive rights and sex education in the schools. Why are we not having that?
You know, I just like in the US when they say I have a black friend, in Malaysia I have a HIV positive friend, and this individual has had a fulfilled life. This person has been on medication for over a decade. Life has been going on fantastic, but there is something about advocacy. This individual doesn't want to out himself or herself. This individual doesn't want to go out there and preach about awareness. So there is a sense of connect between people like us. I presume you're HIV negative, all three of us here, which we don't have a problem, you know, telling other people to raise awareness, but those that are afflicted with this disease might want to keep their mouth shut.
Well,
Because of stigma.
I sincerely think that, you know, what you said, Sharaad, about the success of those programs should be replicated. You know, why is it that we can't replicate it with the kind of reproductive health awareness, with sexual sex education awareness? I mean, all these things actually go a long way in reducing 94% of HIV cases transmitted through sexual relations.
Yeah.
We should be looking at these figures, and I think.
But it's over a period of time,
Yeah,
right? That
everybody-
94% reduction.
Last year. Oh, sorry, 94% of cases last year.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think there's also a question, Melissa, of taking personal responsibility for our health, right? And this has to do with every adult who engages in sexual relations, right? And you can also tell, and this is a global story, of how people maybe in the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic were much more cautious. There's been maybe a drop-off in terms of being cautious. There new cultural forms that attach to people's sexual behavior, including drug use and so on, that might actually diminish their responsible behavior, we would like to put it that way. So there are all kinds of things in the mix. The question is, are we having those frank discussions about what's actually happening in the community? taking a non-judgmental approach to that, and then creating policies that will address them. I mean, it's just as simple as that. But you know, and so much in Malaysia happens around.
It's as simple and as difficult as that, isn't
Yeah,
it?
perhaps, yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
we're going to be right back with more on Consider This. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Consider This. Melissa, Sharaad and Ibrahim, we're looking at the news of the week. Now, the latest has to do with politics, violence breaking out on the street outside the Melaka International Trade Center, where PKR is holding its annual Congress. So, according to the Malay Mail, which I was reading up some of the reports, there was a stone that was thrown into the crowd just before the youth delegates made their way out for lunch and Friday prayers, and that had injured one person. Of course, the chaos erupted at the PKR Youth Congress this morning, whereas the chairman, the permanent chairman, was sacked, Mizan Adli, was smuggled in amid heavy security. Ibrahim, what do you have to say about what's happening in our political scene with PKR?
Okay, so let's give a little bit of background. Any political party, we're talking about UMNO, Amanah, whatever, DAP, there's always wing congress that is taking place. So today is when the youth wing of PKR Congress is taking place. And by nature, youth wing, normally in any party, either UMNO or whatever,
they flap a lot.
Normally, yeah, it's a little bit more riled up than the National Congress, which is happening tomorrow for PKR, and it's happening today for UMNO. The conversation, of course, revolves around how bad could it get. It turns out it's not that bad. Despite the brawl happening, despite allegations from both sides that they are hiring thugs to come on and beat the other guys up, despite all this, nobody has died. Nobody is being hospitalized.
There was an injury, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but this injury was not, was not
perhaps not as serious.
critical. Yeah. So until and unless there is a death, I don't think this is really as dramatic as we want to make it to be.
Yeah, well, there's also the optics. I mean, the question is what Malaysians will accept as behavior, appropriate to political leaders and people who aspire to political leadership. And these are individuals demonstrating perhaps a lack of self-control, but interestingly enough, for PKR, there was, in fact, compact between the two leaders. We were on the brink of having two congresses for PKR. I say we in Northern Sesaka, I'm not a member. But the point is this. So they have come together.
Yeah, you used the first word.
And then, what was interesting is, so they brokered some sort of peace, but that has not sort of trickled down. The question is, what do the participants hope to achieve?
No, this is a proxy war. Let's call it what it is, right? This is a proxy war between Azmin's camp and Anwar's camp. And right now, while the two have seemed to be making up or made up over the past few days, it doesn't translate to their camps, particularly in the youth wing.
Okay, so as observers from the outside, the three of us, right? I would have to say, I mean, it's December, they're having their annual Congress. It's been quite a year for PKR, and you mentioned optics just now, and I'm really wondering how many people watching from the outside can actually say this is a party with its house in order. This is a party which is a linchpin of the coalition.
So who's the net benefactor from this?
And also, I always have to say, with everything that's happened this week, from all kinds of allegations about sex videos and
allegations,
and violence in breaking out and fighting and shouting and ruckuses of videos, videos of ruckus. It's really detracting us from the real issues, and I think a lot of people are just tired of this type of political bickering. Are we being misdirected from the actual conversations that Malaysians should be having?
So what are the real conversations? IPCMC is a real conversation.
Correct.
Trade war is happening right now. Ringgit appreciation.
Depreciation.
Foreign investors pulling out money from Malaysia.
And the stock market.
Those are the kind of conversations that we should have.
Exactly.
Right?
This was a big week for us. Like as you mentioned, the quality of political leadership in Dewan Raya. We should be looking at those things. We should be kind of holding our MPs accountable.
Okay, so this is what they ought to do, but they're not doing that. maybe we need to go back and understand the nature of the party itself, right? We go back in history, as it were. This was a party made up of, from the very beginning, very different groups with very different orientations. So the factionalism that we see, in part, it was there in the origins of the group, right? So you have left-leaning groups and you have right-wing groups and religious groups all came together in the Reformasi era to form a political party, a united front against what they saw as political repression coming from Dr. Mahathir's administration. So I think even in the start, there was always these different tendencies. Now they've coalesced around individuals, and it's not clear whether those individuals represent ideologies, philosophies of such diametrically opposed views that they should come to blows. I mean, that's not clear to me either.
Yeah, is it about ideology, right? Is
Yeah,
it really, is
right?
it
Doesn't
really
seem
about
to be
that?
So
about that.
we are talking about the 20th anniversary of PKR, and if we were to remind ourselves, has there been a peace period for PKR since its inception? Because as far as I can remember, and I was there during the Pematang Power Declaration back in 1998, and the coalition of all these parties in 1999. There hasn't been a single moment in time when PKR was actually united in a particular cause, despite
Would you agree,
gains
Sharaad?
or losses
Well, I
in
mean,
elections.
okay, so the question is your level of disunity. What's clear is that they've managed to keep together. So that people have come and
They're
gone.
keeping together now.
And and that's perhaps the most important thing. The fact that whatever they've done, they managed to capture Selangor, hold it there with the key party, and despite the internal bickering, they never fell apart as a
group?
state level government, right?
Okay, okay.
And then on a national level, they have also, despite everything, come together during general elections and they have won the day. So the differences haven't been as debilitating as it might seem to be.
Okay, but I just think it's really, negative attention is still attention, and there's a lot of negative attention. I'm just wondering, from, again, outside observers, what is it that we want to see PKR do in 2020 to get their house in order, to clean up house?
So to answer that question is to not look at today's event, but to look at tomorrow's event, because Datuk Sri Anwar is going to give his speech at 9 o'clock or 9:30 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, live telecasted on this station. After that and before that, it's going to be speeches by Saifuddin Nasution, as well as perhaps a speech by Azmin Ali. Those are the kind of conversations that we should look at. Tomorrow's event is as more important than today's event, because today, young hot blood, beating each other up or hiring some of the thugs to beat each other up, it's crazy. But tomorrow is where the real deal happens.
Here's the other conversation I think that we're missing because we're so fixated on the bickering within PKR and then UMNO, also General Assembly. You mentioned UMNO. Amanah also is having their national convention today until Sunday.
Yeah.
But what we're missing and what we haven't been paying attention to is following very closely the revelations coming out of the trials. Former Deputy Prime Minister Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi, all the things that have come out about how many luxury vehicles he has, how much he was paying for them, the shopping trips and the credit card bills, all those things we should be outraged over, as opposed to a tussle outside of a convention
You want to
centre.
know something interesting? That there is a preferred bank of choice for these kind of individuals, right? And I don't know what's up with this particular bank that they have so chosen to transact all their activities that are allegedly considered to be money laundering. But what we know now is that some of the facts can be undisputed, because these are credit card transactions that were done by the individual, and they can't say that it wasn't them.
As well as
Well,
trials.
you talk about shock and outrage, right? I think there is probably shock, there's probably dismay, there's probably a lot of emotions.
Not
think
outrage?
I think what's happened is people have become used to it. Now, if
Used to it.
I can't
when
be
the
outraged
former
all the
Prime
time,
Minister's,
Ra. I can't be outraged all the time.
Well, yeah. When the former Prime Minister's home was raided and over R1 billion worth of goods, cash, and luxury items were hauled out of them. I mean, that set the benchmark. I mean, in some ways, the spending by Zahid Hamidi and his wife, I mean, admittedly at the expense of orphans, is awful, but it pales in comparison to what Najib Razak and his wife seem to set as a benchmark.
I mean, the English language can't use the term, when you say you're alarmed, shocked, all that seems to have connote a temporary notion, right?
So
There can't be a state of
after a while, you're
permanence.
no longer alarmed or
I
shocked.
can't be alarmed all the time.
Is it
I
the
can't
new
be shocked.
normal then?
Is it a new normal?
It was the new
Right?
normal of the
Because
price of
Sharaad's
national
right. You're
living.
benchmarking, oh, this fella stole $1 million. Nah, compared to that guy who stole $10 million. And then another guy says, nah, this is this 10% of whatever. It's not enough, right? So the numbers are staggering, yes, but I can't be alarmed all the time.
All right, well, I think we should be. And we should be keeping a very close eye on the trial as it continues. All right, after this, we're going to be taking a look at the ringgit. So make sure you stay tuned to consider this. Welcome back to Consider This. Melisa, Sharaad and Ibrahim with you tonight. We're rounding up the heavy news week we've had. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the depreciation of the ringgit. So, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has actually said that the government is looking for ways to stop the depreciation of the ringgit, which has been a source of concern. He had been responding to all the conversations in the media reports that quoted the MA Research National Worry Index, saying that Malaysians are now most concerned about the economy and the cost of living and the impact to their pockets.
I did a very scientific poll to ask...
You mean that ironic? Better go ahead.
No, this is a very scientific one. More than 50% says that they are concerned about money in their pocket. Less than 2% says that they're concerned about politics, and everyone else is in between for other stuff. That tells you a lot of story in terms of what, even for me, right? I mean, if I were to ask you guys, what is the single most important thing that you can think of right now? I don't know about the two of you, but for me, it's still money in the pocket.
Of course.
And because of that, we have to look around, and we can't be too self-absorbed in our domestic, market, our own income. We have to look at the macroeconomics as well. And right now, Malaysia is in a bad shape. The trade war between China and US is ongoing. Vietnam and Indonesia is still aggressive in trying to find investors to come in. Malaysia, we've seen net cash outflow of foreign money coming out anywhere between $6 billion to $10 billion worth of foreign money being taken out of the country. All that is not good.
But the question is, how much of this can be laid at the feet of the current administration, and can they do anything about it? National governments are, especially governments that have economies that are fairly open to global trade and to all kinds of external factors, aren't really in a position to reshape their position in a kind of easy way. It's not about policy necessarily. They're long-term solutions, perhaps, but can you do
Let me
anything
tell you
short-term?
something, Sharaad, you are so unique as an individual. you think logically, you're not emotive. Unfortunately, we only have one of you in this country.
Yeah.
The rest of the country is very emotional.
Illogical and emotive.
Yeah,
so the opposite of Sharaad.
No, right? Because look, let's face the facts. The reality is that people are going to blame somebody. There has to be a head to be chopped off when something bad happens, despite the fact that that person is not going to be at fault for it or not. And right now, the question is, who's going to be at fault for this dwindling, currency of ours, for this investors not coming in?
Let's look at the ringgit, the fall of the ringgit, right? I mean, a lot of oil-producing countries, currency value is often pegged to the value of crude, right? So when crude prices go up, there is some correlation, right? The question is that all in the mix for the ringgit story?
No.
Is it?
No,
what
it's
else
not.
goes in the mix? I'm not sure about the conversation about what's going on. And can the government, apart from spending lots of money buying up ringgit, what could be a sensible response to the ringgit depreciation?
So you need to look at two things for exports from Malaysia. Number one, crude oil. Crude palm oil, not oil, petrol, but crude palm oil. Number two, the biggest one is actually E&E, or electronics and semiconductors. These two sectors have actually taken a hit and slowed down in exports over the past few months. And throughout the year, compared to last year, we're exporting lesser.
Because the global economy has slowed down.
Okay. So here is a person watching this TV show somewhere, in Klang Valley or whatever, Penang. Do they accept that argument that global, Trump, Xi Jinping, or dulu under BN it wasn't like this, now under Pakatan it's like this, Pakatan's at fault.
Well, okay, so this is a question of communication. It goes back to, in fact, the advice been given to Pakatan Harapan over and over again to communicate better the economic story, and in fact to do it on a regular basis, to in fact appoint an economic spokesperson to address the economic story, because if this government fails or is reduced to a one-term government, it might be not because of its politics, but about
we have
the
a lot. We
economics.
have 4 official spokespersons. We have the Ministry of Economic Affairs. We have MITI, Ministry of International Trade, Finance Minister. We also have the Domestic Consumer Affairs
We
Minister.
also have
No, we
Kanya
have
Johnson
ministers
as well, right?
Yeah, we have ministers, but do we have spokesperson with a strong narrative to educate and to have everybody, in some sense, understand the particular dynamics that we are going through now? Because international trade dynamics are not something the Malaysian government can resolve. I mean, you know, they can't bring Trump and Xi Jinping together and say, hey, please, you know, a truce.
No,
right?
I acknowledge. I see eye to eye.
Yeah.
It's just
we
that
all
nobody's
agree.
out there going to believe you.
We all agree. And
Yeah.
I think, listen, this is also part of the media has a role to play. If the government is failing to communicate this correctly, then it is the role of the media to then put this in the spotlight and story tell the current situation.
That's
not
why.
not by supporting any party, but saying this is the situation right now, and these are the external factors, this is the trade war happening, this is the global economy, and that is the role of what we have to do.
I agree. But that's why the issue of reform is difficult. Police reform, IPCMC, is going to be difficult. Parliamentary reform is going to be difficult. Electoral reform is going to be difficult, because there are pressing matters at hand that needs to be resolved quick and fast. And yet we are still thinking about long-term reform that, you know, is going to
somebody has
reverberate
to
down the
think
You could
about
generational
argue that it
timeline.
could go in tandem. There's nothing to stop an IPCMC.
It's going in tandem, and that's why people are upset. Tanjung PI is the emblematic episode of that.
All right, gentlemen, before the fisticuffs come out, that's all the time we have on the show tonight. I'm Melisa Idris, with me Sharaad, Kuttan, and the host of Notepad with Ibrahim Sani, none other than Ibrahim Sani. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back again on Monday at 10 p.m. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend. Good night.